Okay. So we had reached to nature and nurture. If there are any questions regarding the previous slides, please let me know again. So moving on. So 1.3, learning outcome 1, it's part 3. What does it talk about? This is to explain developmental norms and milestones. Now here, when explanation, whenever you have your assignment also, when there's explanation, it asks you to write more, talk more about it. So developmental milestones, they are defined as the stages of a child's growth and the checkpoints. Okay, so as I said, they're pointers that you need to know, you should be knowing as a healthcare provider, to assess where the child is and where the child should be. So some children might do brilliant on one component, they might be lacking on the other component, or they might not lack at all on any component, or they might lack on all components. This is PIEs, so physical, intellectual, emotional, and social or aspects of their development. So this is important for parents, for healthcare providers, for teachers to know. Okay, and a child's physical growth, social growth, and emotional development, they are considered as developmental milestones. So there's some achievements that they have to have throughout their life as a child. So children, they develop at their own pace. We've talked about no certain there's certain developmental milestones that are generally reached by a specific age, but that doesn't mean that all children will reach. Some child might not crawl at all and just start walking. So you can't say that, you will definitely say that, okay, this child did not crawl, um, but then the child walked, so that's not a drawback for that child. So they're not drawbacks, they're just keeping the child, keeping yourself updated with how this child is growing against any other child. So a child smiling for the first time, saying their first word, or taking their first steps are all considered developmental milestones. A lot more also that we've mentioned before. Developmental milestones, they help parents, healthcare providers, and teachers monitor a child's development and assist in identifying so any developmental delays that you have. So we have support groups over here, send groups over here that provide extra support for those children. We have healthcare providers that are there to provide extra support, um, and the hospitals as well. So a developmental delay will be the failure of a child to reach a specific milestone that professionals believe a child of their age should have met. Should have met doesn't mean that they have to meet it, but if they've not met it, then what do you do about it? So if there's a delay that's been identified, you have interventions. Okay, so if there's a child who's not holding their neck in, let's say, 5 or 6 months when they should be sitting ideally, then that is a concern you need to see. If there's no concern like cerebral palsy, or conditions like if there's a Down's baby syndrome, or if they have a genetic disorder, those I'm not considering those. Their milestones, they don't count for these milestones, so you won't consider them um, in these milestones. Okay, so their achievements or their milestones will be altogether different. We're talking about normal uh, children who are born um, either through normal vaginal delivery or through cesarean section, whatever the case is. We're not concerned about that also, but yeah. So children, there's some children who are born earlier, so they can't hold their necks. There's some children who are born with great difficulty. They've also got to achieve these milestones. But again, these are just to help you understand where they should have been and where they are at the moment, and to see what achievements you have made in terms of your interventions if you've tried any with them. So developmental milestones, they're important because they assist in the tracking of a child in terms of their physical, mental, social, and emotional development. Reaching specific developmental milestones will be significant because it causes a child, shows that a child is growing and developing properly. So you don't need to focus too much on that child. You will focus, obviously, teachers will focus on that child, but you won't have a teacher on them who supports them emotionally or physically or mentally. While it is expected that children reach developmental milestones around the same age, this is not always, I've talked about this. So some reach their milestones earlier, some later. So when a child does not reach a specific milestone, it may raise a concern of a possible developmental delay. Children who have developmental delays, they may need extra support, which we've talked about, interventions such as speech therapy, physical therapy, emotional therapy, etc. So, what are the developmental milestones? There are different types. So, reaching a specific developmental milestone will be important in the proper growth and development of a child. So, parents, teachers, healthcare professionals, they are able to monitor for any potential issues. So, they track them. Okay. So, to track development, parents and healthcare providers, they utilize various developmental milestone tables or checklists. This is to track a child's abilities. Okay, so they'll give the child some tasks and then they'll see what does the child do. So milestone checklists, they include examples of various milestones and the ages that these milestones are typically met by children. So during the first year, there are many critical milestones. So the child starts recognizing their environment. Them this because they're just new to the world, so they rapidly gain a lot of um, understanding of the environment around them. um, but then there are milestones that occur throughout their childhood and adolescent phase as well. So four main types of developmental milestones are physical, cognitive, social, and emotional, and communication and language. uh, so we'll talk a bit about physical milestones. So these are gross motor skills and fine motor skills. We had talked about what gross and fine motor skills are. Um, Anyone out there can recall what gross motor skills included? Just one or two more examples, if you can give of them. What are gross motor skills and what are the examples of fine motor skills? Anyone? You can write it down if you got background noise, no worries. Anyone? Okay. Gross and fine motor skills. Anyone?
Is it examples of gross motor skills you're asking for or the definition?
I'm asking example, any example. What is a
Okay,
gross
maybe
motor skill?
object control,
Yeah,
eye and hand coordinations.
yes. So gross, yeah, gross will be more like walking. Okay, so walking, running, these are all gross motor skills. Okay, so they're gross, they have big muscles involved. Okay, by gross, you can appreciate it by saying that it's big muscles involved. Rolling over unassisted, and this occurs by 6 months. Crawling is gross motor. So you use big muscles and you use multiple muscles. Okay. This happens by 12 months approximately. Fine motor skills will develop later. So you have your gross motor skills developing. You can't expect a child to grasp objects, to hold a crayon. No, they wouldn't. They'll just leave it open, their hands open. Their grasp won't be that strong, or it won't be at all. So this happens at around 12 and 15 months. So they've given you an approximation. That's not an exact date, age. Using utensils between 18 and 24 months, so around 2 years time. They're using a fork, a spoon, not a knife. Uh, and those are all fine motor skills because they have tiny muscles there, the hand muscles that they're using. So they're not large muscles, but they're set of small muscles, tiny muscles that are using for more delicate stuff. Physical developmental delays can be noticed during the first year of a child's life, and these may show that they can't hold their head and neck, have a delayed sitting, crawling, walking, or they have a limp body posture. Muscle spasms, muscle stiffness may be a sign of a physical developmental delay. Some children have that as well, and there are different conditions where they have them. Coming towards the cognitive understanding, ability to think, learn, and solve problems. Um, that includes reciting a nursery rhyme, mm, chanting their alphabets, mm, 1 to 10, counting it. So they have a good cognition. They remember things and they explore the environment. Um, and when they're around 5 years of age, they distinguish between what is real or not real. Okay, so the different examples while we'll talk about it. So, a 5-year-old can recite a nursery rhyme. A child may show signs of cognitive developmental delay when they fail to meet certain milestones. So, cognitive delay, it's generally noticeable around 24 months of age when you actually say, yeah, that's cognitive delay. Signs of this will be lack of curiosity. The child, you'll ask them to hold a pencil at that age. They wouldn't hold blocks. Or short attention span like ADHD, attention deficit hypersensitivity disorder, where hyperactivity, sorry, disorder, where the child has very short attention span. So if you give them blocks, they would just for 1 minute they'll have it, and then they'll want something else, or they'll have their attention towards something else. That's ADHD, isn't it? So that's a pathology, that's a concern for parents and for carers. Difficulty thinking logically or difficulty understanding rules. In addition, a child may show a lack of self-help skills. So they can't wash themselves, they can't bathe themselves while while they're older in age. So these are cognitive milestones when they have an understanding of the environment. Social and emotional milestones. So socially, we know that children are very social. Um, they know how to express their emotions. Some children have a lack of emotional regulation, so they can't actually regulate their emotions. So a 5-year-old will have tantrums, a 6-year-old will have tantrums, um, because they can't regulate their emotions, even if they're in a situation or in an environment where they need regulated emotions, such as a school. Child may throw a tantrum in school as well. Very less chances, but they can do that. And that is, if they do it quite often, that then becomes a concern. But if they do it sometimes, it's okay because they're learning to control their emotions. They don't know what emotions are. Okay, so they develop relationships with each other. They have best friends. They have emotional milestones as well. And a 2-year-old will smile at their parents. A 6-month-old child will smile at themselves in the mirror. Or a 4-year-old will enjoy playing with other children rather than alone. If they don't, they have interventions. Okay, so children may show signs of social and emotional developmental delays if they struggle with carrying on a conversation, understanding social cues, or have difficulty managing their emotions. A child may have emotional developmental delay if they throw frequent long lasting tantrums, if they are difficult to calm down. Okay, so the ways to calm down a child, and every child has tantrums. There's nothing like no tantrums at all in a child. Communication and language milestones. This is very important, where the child learns to communicate when they know a yes means a yes. What does a yes mean? What does a no mean? It's not just verbal, it's non-verbal also. So a newborn communicates non-verbally by rooting. So what is rooting? When you place something on their cheek, they will start turning their face towards that object or that trigger on their cheek, thinking it's milk for them. That's a rooting reflex. So a 9-month old may nod their head up and down when they mean a no or yes. Speech does not develop in, if it does not develop, it mostly doesn't develop in a clear pattern until about age 3. Uh, Again, if you speak more to the child, and it is even better. So, verbal communication milestones would be a 12-month-old who says their first words, or a 3-year-old who can converse, have a conversation in full sentences. There may be difficulties or signs of communication and developmental delays if their speech is difficult to understand, if they cannot form sentences, or if they have a limited vocabulary. In addition to this, a child may have a language delay if they are unable to understand the meaning of words. This is of a language that they speak, okay, which is spoken to at home. If they have never been spoken to in English, let's say, and they are assessed in English, they can't speak the language. It's not possible to have a communication or assess them in that way. So they will be needed to speak to in a language that they know and understand. Uh, so that's how we work on some of the skills or the milestones of the child. Now coming towards analysis of each developmental area, how does it have an impact on the other? So we said that nurture and nature, they have an impact on each other. So your nature is mostly determined by your environment. Now, how does each developmental milestone impact one another, or a developmental aspect have an impact on each other? So when we work with children, it's very important to understand different kinds of influences that may impact their development. So, development is divided into different headings, and we'll talk about some of these. Physically, and refining physical skills also affects pupils' ability to become independent, socialize, and grow in confidence. So, if they know a task, they know how to write, that makes them independent, and they grow more in confidence. Whereas if a child doesn't have a specific talent, or a specific skill has not been reached, they can't speak, for instance, that then has an influence on several other factors also. So if you've had more than one child, or if you've experienced people having more than one child, the second child learns very fast because they have exposure from the first child. Um, so this is how it happens. So their environment, if their environment is conducive, if they have an environment where they're mostly spoken to, they're mostly um, like if there's a child, an older child, they speak more to the younger child. That younger child learns faster than compared to when the older child had learned a specific task, for instance. And this is all because of exposure. Okay, so there are many examples that can describe how different aspects of development can affect each other. So most of the time, one aspect will lead to another. For example, if a child has a language barrier, this can stop other children from playing or talking to this child. They'll be having low self-esteem. This child who doesn't can't speak the language, he'll feel as an outsider, or she will feel as an outsider, which may impact their social and behavioral development. Some children are overweight. Now, this is health, physical. So they will struggle to do PE, physical exercise. So they may have bullying, and a bullying environment where they have lack of confidence again. So if the child is disabled, this can impact the child's physical, social, and intellectual development. For example, if a child is not able to walk, they may spend more time learning, and that will be will positively affect his intellectual development. It may leave that child confused, not being able to understand why is he different than others, and will affect his emotional, social, and behavioral development. So there are other examples also. Just this last slide, and then we can move on to the next set of slides. So a newborn baby doesn't understand why he needs to share his mom's attention with his new brother, or sorry, an older child will not understand. So there's a mom and a dad, obviously, and there's this older child, and there's a new child. So the mom's attention will obviously be focused on the younger child. Um, but then this is not the child who is older cannot understand that. Um, so whereas a younger child or a baby doesn't have that understanding, the older child can be made to understand that, yeah, this is how it is. However, they may feel let down, they may feel isolated, angry, and this will then impact, so their emotions can have an impact on their social and behavioral development. Okay. And we talked about here, there's language development. It is known that communication and intellectual development, they're very closely knitted to each other. Because the importance of language and its link to learning is not is undoubtedly so important. So there's language and there's learning, it goes hand in hand. So children's development in language happens when they're talked to, they listen, they are praised, they're encouraged. Whereas when they're shunned, or where there's more negative there in their environment, these all things go down. So a child who's not been spoken to, or their speech hasn't been developed as yet, they may have struggles in their emotional and social development, which would then lead to themselves having a poor self-image and reluctance to participate in group activities. They might not be confident enough. Intellectual development. So children and young people, they have intellectual development, and this will depend on a wide extent um, on their own experiences. Okay. So imagination, it's a very important component in a child's cognitive development. Children use their imaginations a lot. So they tell stories, they dress up, they act as a certain character. um, and then poverty and deprivation, we've talked about war situations. Children who have exposure to a deprived background, they're less likely to thrive and achieve at school, um, as parents struggle to manage their needs. Uh, they have limited social opportunities, which may influence their development. Um, they have no recreational activities in the neighborhood because they're living in a deprived area. Children have less places to play with friends and families. um, if they have them, all these positive impacts are there, it then impacts their growth and development as well. These are some of the references that you can have a look at. These slides will be shared with you on Monday, hopefully. Um, yeah, definitely, the message I said. Uh, I will start sharing the next set of slides. Again, I might not be able to complete them today, so I should be okay completing them mm, next weekend. I'll just quickly take your attendance if that's okay. Um, that's fine. Okay, thank you. So I'll start sharing slides. Just a minute. There. So we are doing learning outcome 2 today. So, yeah, here we go. Oh, thank you. I've already taken a screenshot of your names. Thank you for adding those. Mm, thank you. So, yeah. Any questions? If there are any, please let me know. Okay, so we're on the second unit of sorry, the second learning outcome of human growth and development. So here we are understanding potential impacts or potential effects of life factors and the events on growth and development. Potential effects of life factors. So the different life factors that we'll talk about and how these events, we've talked a bit about them already. So this is what we're going to talk about in more detail. So, a bit about what indicative content you will have in this session. So, we'll talk about life factors and events such as biological influences, lifestyle, education, employment, socio-economic relationships, culture, physical environment, health, bullying, aspiration. The effects can be several effects. You may have an illness, a disability, loss of focus, increase in focus, achievement, less achievement, need for support and guidance, access to services. So, some key terminologies need to be explained over here. So, when we want to understand the potential effects of life factors and events on growth and development, what are they? So, as individuals, um, while they go through their life events and their health and well-being is impacted it by a number of different factors. Um, So there may be different factors that may help impact their health and their growth positively or negatively. So these would include physical, emotional, social, economic, and environmental factors. So if we know these, we can understand how these can impact um your physical, the same pies, so physical, intellectual, emotional, and social development. How does it have, how is it impacted through different environments, different economic conditions, etc. So a bit about environmental factors. So the environment which we live in, it's very foggy, isn't it? um, and I'll talk generally, not only about the UK. So if you live in a house that is very, that is stable, and you have the environment that is healthy, compared to a, so there's fog outside, okay. um, if there's, we don't have noise over here, we have pollution, but it's not, when you think about areas that have smog. So if anyone knows what smog is, I don't know if anyone knows. So smog is smoke and fog. You have it mostly in the winters. So there's so much smoke or so much pollution that it appears to be as fog, but it is not fog. We're not getting well here also. We're very, very unwell, most of us, with this fog, but with smog, it's deadly. Okay, so they're asked to go in face masks wherever you have this fog, smog. So sorry. A lot of other pollution such as noise, loud music, radiation. So people who live in radiation areas that have a lot of radiation, they have a lot of developmental problems. They have fertility problems. They can't give birth to children. They have less sperm count, or their ovaries don't work well. Air, water, sewage, if there's any condition like this, it will impact your growth, the child's growth and development as well. Economic factors, so such as your income, your wages, your salary, benefits, savings, debts, all of these have an impact on your health, your well-being. So if you buy healthy food, you need money for that. You buy good clothing, you need warm clothes most of the time over here. You need money for that. You need money for your bills, your debts, there's a lot of poverty out there. So, and this is because things are getting expensive. We're changing that those people who were in middle socioeconomic groups are now in lower socioeconomic groups because everything's changing. Poor living conditions can have negative impacts such as dampness can have respiratory problems, overcrowding can have anxiety, depression, stress. Poor heating or lack of heating can give rise to colds, flu, poor health. Having no proper spaces, gardens, can have lower fitness levels, lead you to obesity, lethargy, etc., from lack of exercise. Physical factors, so genetic inheritance, can be your eye color, your hair color, or you may have more complex conditions such as cystic fibrosis or Down syndrome. These are genetic inheritance factors. Your diet, your nutrition, hydration, your breastfeeding, bottle feeding, weaning, all of these have an impact um, on your health, your opportunity to play, your opportunity to have physical activity. Uh, all of these have an impact physical um, on your physical health and disease. There are certain types of abuse also in our we might have had exposure to any one of them. So there's emotional, you can call it financial also. There's physical, sexual, psychological, and neglect is also a type of abuse. This is something that has been added now. So any sort of these abuses can have an impact on your health. Okay. So, negative impacts of noise pollution, stress, anxiety, high blood pressure, disrupted sleeping patterns, hearing loss. These are all the impacts that you can have because of uh, noise pollution, let's say. Okay. So, one mm, thing that is not proper, or one aspect that is not proper in the environment, can have a lot of other things happening as a result of that thing. Social and emotional factors. I'll just see till where we can go. Uh, just bear with me just a minute. Okay, so I guess we have less time left, so I might not rush through all these slides, and I will just go till this this slide, and then uh, we can call it a day. So when we come back, we can then proceed. We won't have too much to cover. Uh, because I don't want to rush through the topics. So social and emotional factors, they include gender, your family, your relationships, your abuses that we talked about, sexual relationships, your employment, um, adverse childhood experiences, their traumatic experiences that you may have before the age of 18, and they can impact individuals into adulthood. So they'll have a lot of emotional, sexual instability who've gone through adverse childhood experiences. Um, if you have any of these in your lifetime, now everyone is neglected at some point, but if that is very constant in a child, if that child has been neglected to an extent that um, it has disrupted their mental health, they will then have the impact of that in their older ages as well. Relationships can have positive or negative impacts, such as trustworthiness. Uh, you can have, obviously, if there's a trustworthy relationship, you will have a positive impact. You could have people who can hurt your feelings, that can have a negative impact on you. So there are different relationships. in which you have different feelings attached. This is the last slide that I'll go through. So this is an explanation of the potential impacts of life factors and events on growth and development of individuals. So let's talk about urban environment. People leave the rural environment and come to the urban cities for certain conditions because of economy, employment. Uh, there's less poverty in the urban environment. So there's social context also. There's social um, interactions also. There are certain communities that you have in urban environment. Um, you have early years children and young people who are supported in urban environments, or in a country that has has place for positive and growth and development of individuals. There are more services, interventions, and projects in those areas, okay, that have a good economy, that have less poverty, okay. So the more you're in a situation where there's more poverty, there's low socioeconomic status, all of this goes down, okay. So even services, interventions, and projects are less there. You have less of communities thriving together. Okay, so I'll end here at this slide. Does anyone have any questions? Any questions? No, so no